Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Q&A portion of the event. I'm so excited to be here with Sara and Dan, and we're going to be asking Dan some very intense questions that some of you submitted to us. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Cassidy. How are you doing?
Hi. Good. How's the weather over there?
It's weirdly sunny for Berlin.
Hey, that's not bad.
We've been got leaves on some of the trees already. The sadness is coming down.
Yeah, the winter's over, I hope.
No, it's not.
How about you, Dan? How's it going?
It's pretty good. Are you asking about the weather or?
I could be. It's London, so I'm assuming there are some clouds.
There are some clouds today, but it's actually been pretty good in the last like 4 days. But I think like all the trees are shocked because it seems like the winter has been going on for much longer than anticipated.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like the spring fake out that happens every year. And then eventually it'll be beautiful, but
yeah, for like 3 weeks, and then it will be like 40 degrees Celsius, which doesn't say anything to you, Cassidy, but it's a lot.
In freedom units, I believe that's hot.
It's sticky. Sticky weather.
Gross. Anyway, we have lots of questions for you, Dan, submitted by all kinds of people, and I'm super excited to ask all of them because some of them are pretty interesting. And so Sara and I will go back and forth and see what you have to say. The first one says, hey, Dan, I sometimes ask myself, how can I become better as a developer? From your point of view, how can I be as good of a developer as you? It's one of those it depends questions.
Yeah, I think a lot depends on like, you know, what kind of development you're doing. I don't think I'm a particularly great developer per se, but I mean I definitely learned some things that I think are useful. I think like some of the biggest, you know, the most useful ones are just learning to debug stuff. And I think I know that it helped me a lot to kind of stop, you know, not rely on guessing so much, because I used to rely on a lot of guessing, like, oh, maybe I comment out this line, maybe I changed +1 to -1. Oh, it works, great. But that's not really, you know, that, or like add like something throws at like if this is not null, and like not even think about why. So I think like being more kind of trying to figure out like if there is a problem, like really understanding the problem before trying to fix it, and kind of being almost pedantic about it, to the point that like if I don't understand why the bug exists, I shouldn't fix it, because I'll fix it in the wrong place and just create 10 more. So I think being methodical, and specifically like I think a lot of this is it's just discipline, like knowing and a little bit of planning, right? Like, you know, there is a bug, so you know that it must have happened from this point to this point. Like you can kind of prove to yourself there is no bug at this point, so you know you can start from here. So somewhere between here and here something breaks, and like the common method to kind of solve that is like slice it in the middle, like, and figure out a way to see, does the bug occur here? And so either it's here or it's here. And so you kind of slice things up like with time until you find exactly where the person who wrote the code did not anticipate something happening, or like misunderstood the requirements, and then that's where you fix it. So I think like learning this kind of process, like being methodical about, don't make like 5 changes, because then if it works, you don't know which of the changes helped. So, or like be able to like do them and then undo them and then do part of them. But I think most of these things, they really come down to the same thing, which is just not guessing and trying to, trying to establish what exactly is happening in your program, what was the expectation of the person who wrote it, and what is the reality, and where do they not match. And once you find it, you fix that part. I think that's maybe good advice.
It is good advice.
Yeah.
So you don't do the thing where you like change things in 5 places and then be happy it works out of magic. You don't trust. You wouldn't
I
have
mean,
liked Angular 1.
sometimes
You wouldn't have liked Angular 1 if you don't like magic. I'm just saying.
I don't know.
Like, have
I
you never
think
used it?
sometimes it works out, but well, I used it a little bit.
Oh, okay.
It was actually I thought it was fine. It's well, I remember I had this error, cannot digest in the middle of digest or something like this. That was pretty confusing. But then 5 years later, well, not five, like a few years later, I was learning React and I used this Flux library, and it had an error that said cannot dispatch in the middle of dispatch. And I was like, oh,
That's
I guess
what
it's a more
happened
universal
years ago.
idea.
I remember now. Okay, so moving on to the second question. Are there any browser features, in your opinion, that open up possibilities for frameworks, like full browser support for web streams, like the file API? I think it's called the file API, like stuff like that. Is there anything that you can think of that will, like, make your job easier as a framework developer?
Mm, maybe, but I have a hard time. I usually don't think about this stuff as much. Like maybe Andrew or Sebastian would be able to answer this better.
Honestly, same. I had to literally just Google now what the web streams API was. If that makes you feel better.
Well, I
You can
think
also cut this part.
No, it's cool.
So we're keeping the part where I said I had to Google that, right? Okay, continue.
Yeah, I don't really remember something that I was excited about recently. There's definitely a bunch of APIs that keep coming out. I think the hard thing about new APIs is you can't use them immediately because the older browsers don't support them.
Right.
So I kind of check them like 2 years later after they come out.
Nothing has gotten me as hyped as when optional chaining came out. That changed my world.
Yeah, but you can do that with Babel. So like Babel.
True.
Babel.
Yeah.
Babel. Like if you can fake it with Babel, like then it's fine, but you can't fake like a file API or a Bluetooth API.
True. Yeah, that's very true.
Optional chaining is the best thing. I found out you can optional chain functions while doing a code review at remote. You can put the thing between like the name of the function and the function thing, and my life is completely changed. Like that's it. It was like when I found out that you could console that and warn things.
Oh yeah, that was a big day when I learned about that.
It was a big day. Okay, Cassidy, go on.
Okay, anyway, what are your thoughts on some of these new frameworks that are coming out, like Solid.js and Astro and Marco?
I don't think Marco is new. I thought it's been out there since 2012 or something. Like I think
That's
it
what
is.
I thought too, but this is what the
established.
asker asked, so we're just going to assume that they're correct.
Yeah. Well, I didn't mean to imply that.
Oh no, you're
contradicting you. But yeah. I think Marco has some actually really interesting ideas that like Marco. I think. Well, I haven't looked at it super closely, but I read some of the kind of articles describing some parts of how it works that are like, I think they were inspired by some of the stuff that like Facebook was putting out about how they were doing like in 2011 or even earlier server-side rendering with streaming, where you don't just with out of order streaming. So that's different from like just generating HTML and it's just like top to bottom, so you kind of see the page top to bottom. But actually, like maybe if some part is like maybe the sidebar or like some part is waiting for more data, or like a dashboard, you can imagine like several like things on the dashboard that are maybe waiting for data on the server. And with a lot of classical kind of frameworks, you just can't express that. Like you have to, like, I don't know, in traditional server-side rendering, like maybe PHP and Rails, and I'm not sure, maybe they have tools now to do this, but like in a lot of traditional approaches, you can only, like if something is taking a long time, you kind of have to block the whole page before you can emit HTML for those things because they have to be in order, like the piece of HTML is there. Whereas I think like Marco, and there are some server-side frameworks that support this. They support out of order streaming, where you can specify that like instead of this piece of thing, just like emit some kind of placeholder, and then later in the stream, it will include some HTML for that part, like when it's ready, and also like a little bit of code to actually like slice it, like just put it into the right place in the page. And that's actually like that technique is what we like are adding to React in 18. So in React 18 we support streaming server render and out of order, which lets you do the same thing, basically like skip some parts that may take a while to like fetch the data on the server and then emit them later in the same stream as HTML and have some inline script tags just inserted in the right places. So I thought it was interesting that like Marco did that many years ago with different constraints. Like it doesn't work the same way as React, but Marco did that, and like none of the popular frameworks do that. Like I thought like that's an example where like if you're looking for interesting ideas, they're often not in the popular hype space. Yeah, but actually like sometimes they're a bit on the fringe, and then eventually there's like they gain some spotlight. And I thought that's interesting. I don't personally see myself very interested in things like Astro because, and not again, I'm not saying it's bad or anything. I think that philosophically, I don't very much like the idea of kind of like islands of code, like, or like mixing different technologies, which you don't have to do, of course, but I think a lot of people with like microphone and mindset like to put like different libraries in different parts of the product because teams can't agree to each other. I don't think this is good. And I'm not saying Astro like encourages that, it just supports that, which is, I guess, great, but
I did have Vue and React talk to each other once, and I was just like, whoa, this is weird. And
it was Angular 1 ran the React once, and it was very cursed.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are all sorts of like environments where like social environments where you maybe have to do this because you just have two teams that really can't agree on anything. But I don't think it's a good, mixing things is a very good technological decision. But I think in general, I don't really like programming models where you kind of have to use different types of programming for different kind of parts of the page, where you have this strict separation, like this is dynamic, this is static, and then they use different technologies for those, which is kind of like, I think on some level you could say that Astro maybe a little bit like this, like some of the new Rails stuff is a little bit like this as well, where it's just like kind of different dialects for different things. And I think I'm a lot more drawn to, you just have a single paradigm, you just have a single way of doing things, but then somehow it's designed in a way that it compiles to the most efficient output for like each kind of content, which is kind of what we're like trying to do. It's still like super experimental, it's nowhere near, don't make benchmarks, but like I think server components is in React is part of this idea where you have a single programming model, but some things run on the client, some things run at the build time or on the server, and you still look at it as a single application made of components. It's just that we can kind of pick where they execute, and hopefully with like more iteration and more work, we can get to an output that is compact enough and efficient enough that actually it's a pretty good base to build on. But I mean, it's and this was solid. Again, haven't looked at it super closely. I think it's interesting that they're like, I think they're one of the few kind of libraries that are currently exploring some kind of like concurrency primitives built in the front end space. I think there's something that React does that is pretty unorthodox, and a lot of people are like, no, this is this is not necessary, or they don't see the value. And I think it's pretty interesting that like Solid is experimenting in that space, but it's also a pretty different approach to what we're doing, and there are like some philosophical differences where I also I'm biased to prefer the React approach, but it's always nice to talk to Ryan. Ryan is the person, one of the people developing Solid. I think he has very measured and pleasant presence on Twitter, so it's always a pleasure to see him.
Yeah, the proxy objects in Solid kind of broke my brain at first when I was like, wait, I can't destructure this. I gotta organize my signals and stuff differently than I would in a React context.
Yeah, I feel like there's there are things that are maybe unintuitive to people about the React model, and that gets a lot of criticism. But I also think people kind of underestimate, that with other approaches there are also weird things, but they're just different kinds of weird things, and it's like which weirdness do you kind of prefer? And I think some of it is just a matter of taste.
Yeah, which weirdness works best with your brain.
Yeah, no, I think it's literally that. Yeah. So the next question is, imagine it's the year 2030. The pandemic is over. You can go outside. And React is just ranked version 35. And what are some things that you wish to see in React in 2030? And like, do you even imagine React lasting this long? Like, just general questions for the future. Just some food for thought there.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I imagine React as a programming language for building user interfaces that is runs on all platforms. There's a shared set of primitives. So like you can, like your Create React app like runs on iOS or whatever. And there's like good built-in animation, data fetching, routing, like there's answers to all of those questions. They also work across different platforms. And it's also like, unlike a lot of these cross-platform solutions, it's actually like, it's easy to have accessibility parity across the devices. There isn't really, like when you compile it, the web, it's a real web thing. It's not a, like a thing that, yeah.
That's what the young ones call it.
Well, I mean, if it's diffs with all the right attributes in a way that, they actually work, like it's possible to make it work. It's just really hard. But I just think like, there are very non-webby approaches, and I'd like to think that React continues the tradition of being very webby, and but also working across devices. Maybe like React and React Native would not be such, and I guess like by that point, like maybe AR will be a big thing. So maybe you would also like be able to target that easily. And it wouldn't be like a separate brand. Like maybe it's just like all of that is React. But that's just how I kind of imagine it. I'm not, don't quote me on this. It's just kind of like for each of the things we're trying to do, it's the, where it meets.
I think it's something that is definitely already happening. Like there's a React wrapper for a lot of things that sometimes you're just like, that's kind of cursed. But like PDFs, I'm like, I get it, but why? Like,
and there's React 3.js and stuff like that too. So
React 3.5 is great. Don't cry.
Oh, I'm just saying it exists, but it's not the first thing you would think of.
I think the most incredible thing that I found that exists by accident is a React thing that renders UI in Unity. So all the UI for games, you can build it in React because it's a pain in the ass to make any of that in Unity. So like, I think it's a future that it's actually like happening, literally. Like if I want to make like an Electron and like a mobile video game, apparently, and like a website, I can make all of that stuff in React. Will it be easy? Will I cry? It will not be easy and I will cry, but I can. Hopefully one day I won't cry. Is that what you're saying?
That's the main difference. How many tears will we have trying to build for all of these different platforms?
Yeah.
Okay, next question. Is the internal Facebook CSS and JS framework still going to be open sourced? Will constructible style sheets change the CSS and JS landscape?
I think, well, I don't actually know if it's gonna be like I thought it was going to be open source at some point. I just don't know.
Is it
I
mind
don't know.
blowing though?
I don't
CSS
well,
lets you use there.
I'm also not sure, like I don't know the landscape in open source enough, but I think it's probably comparable to something that already exists. Maybe there are some things that it does better, but I think the important parts is just like it's fully compiled, so it turns it into actual CSS. It's not like dynamic. It's not dynamically generating rules or anything like this. So it's actually efficient. But I know there are libraries in open source that do something similar. So like maybe Linaria, I'm not sure, but
yeah, Linaria is the one that does it to everything. There are some that do it if you don't use like props in it, for example, and then just leave props as dynamic. I also think is a good idea.
Yeah, but I think overall we're kind of moving towards, like, we used to be very unopinionated about styling, and I think we're getting a few more opinions now because there are more constraints, like like streaming server rendering, server components, a bunch of other things, where like we start caring a bit more about like APIs and also about performance and how that works. And I think like overall we're kind of thinking like for dynamic stuff, like just use inline styles, and then for things that don't change, use something that compiles it to CSS, so that it doesn't have like extra runtime cost, because otherwise it's like, well, a lot of these approaches with runtime CSS and JS are really, really expensive and inefficient. So well, I'll get quoted on this, I don't know. They're not extremely expensive, but they are more expensive than not doing that, right?
Yes.
So in general, we're kind of like solutions that are able to compile static parts to plain CSS, and maybe atomic is even better because then you don't, like, at some point you reach a plateau where you maybe add new styles, but you don't get more rules because each rule is unique. But this can be implementation detail, right? Like it doesn't need, you don't have to author things this way like Tailwind. You can, but like also you don't have to if your tool can generate it automatically. As for constructible style sheets, I have no idea. I haven't looked at them.
I feel like you mentioned a lot about a world, which sounds great, by the way, but it's like where a lot of the tools do the things in like the back end. I can't think of a better word. Like in like the back end, so you don't have to deal with it. Like you just write your CSS, and then the tool will be like, okay, I see that this can be automatically done with just, I'll give you a CSS file, and I can't do this, so I'll do that. So like you're kind of removing a lot of the manual labor that we have to do now in a lot of stuff. That's definitely a feature I can get behind. So this is in general not about just React or JavaScript. If you could give any advice to yourself about anything, like past self, what would it be?
Well, that's kind of tricky because like if I could give the advice, then I might not have the
Life
and
experience?
like if you give yourself, yeah, like then how would I know to give this, right? Like it's not.
Yeah. Imagine it's 2050. You came back from the future to 2008. To no, wait, what a year is this? 2020. Okay, 2015 to like 2015, Dan, and you could only tell him one thing. What would you tell him? Don't watch Suicide Squad.
Buy Bitcoin.
Buy Bitcoin.
Yeah,
don't watch Suicide Squad.
I was thinking about the Bitcoin thing, because then you just get super rich and then you can do whatever. That sounds, I mean, that's kind of sounds nice. I don't know.
It does sound pretty nice, doesn't it?
That sounds really nice. It's not kind of one. Imagine you work by choice. Mind blowing.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think I'll yeah, sure. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so we are slowly running out of time, and so we'll try to go quickly through these last few questions. What are the most frequently asked questions about React, and which ones are your favorite?
I don't know. I think people ask a lot about virtual DOM, and like I don't even know what that is, because I don't know what people mean by it. Like you could kind of think of it in different ways. I think people take some of these things way too seriously because there's a lot of like Medium articles about them. I think maybe I can pick why does React need keys? Why do I have to specify keys in the list?
Oh my God. Yeah, you will understand when a problem with keys happens to you. I feel like that's the best answer you can give. There will be one day you will understand. There was going to be a massive bug, and the fix is putting keys, and you will be like, oh, that's happened to all of us.
I've had so many feeds and stuff and lists of things just break entirely.
Yeah. So,
well, and I think my favorite part of it, I think my favorite part of it is that, well, that's the keys are the frequent question, but the kind of the fun part is that keys are useful outside of lists too, and I think a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
So this is the next kind of galaxy brain moment for keys.
It is. It's when you're like, I think I could fix this with keys, and it's just like a bunch of divs, and then it fixes it, and you're like, I am a god. I'm a programming god. I just put a string in the React prop. So we're at the last question, and someone is saying that they are. What language do you think someone who is a refugee right now in 2022 should learn in order to provide a good standard of living, like themselves, a good standard of living?
Well, I don't know if I don't know if there's anything specific about being a refugee that, like, I don't know if there are any constraints like time to,
I think it's
like you have to learn something fast or
free. I think that's the main constraint. Like, I think free may be like, or cheap may be the main constraint about this. Yeah. So like Java, you kind of need to go to college, right? Or university. Like, but for example, JavaScript, you don't, right? So I think it's a lot about the constraints are like, it has to be free or mostly free. And it has to be something that you can apply in like a job.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're talking to a person writing JavaScript, of course.
Yeah, I think so too.
I would say that, but it's like the market is huge. The
Python, I think, should also be a good option, to be fair.
Yeah, but then yeah, I mean, Python.
Then you have to write Python. Is that what you're thinking?
Well,
that's the con.
But also, like, I just think, like, it depends on what you want to do, right? Like, if you want to deal with like data or something like this, then sure, like Python is great. If you just want to like make web apps, then like you have to learn client side anyway, so why not learn a language that works in both places? And if you want your life to be really hard, then I think like you can maybe learn Rust. I think it is kind of, I wouldn't say it's the kind of thing that you learn fast, but maybe if you have some background in like lower level programming, like that could be a good thing to pick up, because people it's getting more and more adoption for those kinds of tasks, and it has a pretty exciting ecosystem as well. So it's probably going to be like a bigger thing in the next several years. So it's also a good option.
There's definitely shortages of Rust developers and Go developers, I think.
Yeah. I have a friend of mine who can code both, and she's basically a god. Like that's who she is.
Job offers everywhere.
Yeah, basically. She's just like a god. Yeah, so that's all the questions we had. Thank you so much. And yeah, I don't know what else to say. So I think we can just cut that part where I said that's all the questions we had. Thank you so much, because that was really awkward.
Well, I think
now we have to keep it like this. We have to keep
it so awkward.
Well, I'll do conclusion, Cassidy.
Oh, thank God. Continue.
Well, I think that's all the questions that we had. Dan, thank you so much for answering all of them and being so honest about all of them. It's really, really helpful, and I'm sure people got a lot out of it. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for hosting and inviting me.
Of course. What? Of course. Why am I being so awkward?
We're keeping this in the cut. Okay.
Okay,
we're
that's
moving-
fine. Like I can live with this one. I can live with this one. Like,
Great.
Of course.
Okay. Well, that being said, we're going to move on to the next talk. Thanks, and we'll see you later.